Welcome to AI Short Story Movie Recap. I'll tell you the story of a sports action movie called The Champion. Now sit back and enjoy the movie. The story follows the life of a former Korean arm wrestler named Mark. He is currently working as a bouncer at a club in America. One night, his old friend Kim approaches him and tries to convince him to join an arm wrestling match. Mark isn't interested, but Kim doesn't give up and eventually persuades him. They go to another part of the club, where people are happily placing bets. Mark's opponent has remained undefeated all night, making him the underdog. No one wants to bet on Mark, which actually benefits Kim. The match begins, and Mark shows why he was once a professional arm wrestler. His opponent struggles, but can't even move Mark's hand an inch. Even though Mark doesn't take the match seriously, he still wins, and Kim takes home a bucket full of money. After the match, Mark's opponent refuses to accept defeat and punches Kim, causing a brawl between Mark and several customers. Because of the chaos, Mark gets fired from his job. A week later, he finds a new job as a security guard at a grocery store. He lives a decent life, but always misses Korea. An arm wrestling tournament is set to take place in Seoul, and the winner will have a chance to compete internationally. Mark looks at his old medals and decides to take on this new challenge. When he arrives in Seoul, Kim picks him up from the airport. They go to a restaurant and talk about their plans. Kim wants to be Mark's manager and handle all negotiations with promoters. However, he also secretly plans to enter the betting business to make more money by taking advantage of Mark's skills. Before the competition, Mark and Kim explore Seoul. At one tourist spot, people mistake Mark for an attraction and take pictures with him. That night, they visit a club, but Mark just stands in a corner the whole time, looking like a bouncer. On the way to the hotel, Kim asks if Mark wants to find his real mother. Mark was given up for adoption as a child. He tells Kim he isn't interested because it's all in the past. Kim drops him off at a hotel, which turns out to be a love hotel. Mark experiences a vibrating waterbed for the first time, but what catches his attention is a gift from Kim, a cell phone with his mother's address inside. Meanwhile, Kim meets with a millionaire loan shark named Mr. Yu and asks him to sponsor Mark. At first, Mr. Yu is upset that Kim spoke to him without permission and hangs him upside down as punishment. However, after watching a video of Mark, he agrees to the sponsorship, with one condition. Mark must win and lose matches based on his orders. The next day, Mark follows the address on his phone and reaches his mother's house. Before knocking, two kids approach him. Because of his large build, they think he's a monster and run away. They tell their mother, Sumi, about the scary man outside. She looks through the window and sees Mark walking away. Sumi runs a struggling thrift shop and owes money to Mr. Yu. His men often harass her for payments. Meanwhile, Kim introduces Mark to potential sponsors and shows off his skills. Another wealthy sponsor, Mr. Cheng, is also introduced. He is Mr. Yu's business partner and bets large amounts of money on fights. Mark proves his strength by defeating a huge man from the Navy. Impressed, the sponsors reward him and Kim with a luxurious suite at a five-star hotel. Later, Kim gets a message from Mr. Yu, instructing him that Mark must win his first match but lose the second. During dinner, Kim brings up the topic of throwing the second match. He is surprised when Mark immediately agrees without hesitation. The next day, Sumi prepares her kids for school. Her eldest son, Ju-yong, worries that the big man, Mark, will return. Sumi suspects that Mark might be someone from her past. After sending the kids to school, she finds an old photo of young Mark with his mother. Ju-yong and his younger brother, Jun-hee, see Mark again. Jun-hee is excited, but Ju-yong threatens to call the police if he sees Mark near their house again. Later, we meet Korea's arm wrestling champion, Combo. Mr. Yu invites him to his club to test Mark's skills. Before betting money on Mark, Combo wants proof of his strength. Mark competes against a 7-foot giant and wins, impressing Combo. Sumi is also at the club and watches Mark's match. During a break, Mr. Yu tries to touch Sumi inappropriately, claiming he owns her because of her debts. Mark sees this and gets angry. When the second match begins, Mark wins intentionally to defy Mr. Yu. Furious, Mr. Yu declares that he owns Mark, but Mark simply pushes him away and walks off. Kim is shocked by Mark's betrayal and realizes that Sumi is the reason. Angry, Kim confronts Sumi and demands to know her relationship with Mark. At the same time, Mr. Yu arrives and starts beating up Kim. Luckily, Mark arrives and fights Mr. Yu's men alone. Sumi begs Mr. Yu to stop, but he pushes her away. The police arrive and arrest both Mark and Kim. They must prove Mark's identity before he can be released, but Mark has lost his bag and passport. To test if he is a real athlete, the police officer arm wrestles him. Mark wins, but without an ID, he still can't be freed. Suddenly, Sumi arrives with her children and an old ID of Mark. She also shows a picture of Mark with his mother as proof that he is Korean. It is revealed that Sumi is Mark's stepsister and that their mother died a year ago. Mark is heartbroken by the news. They invited Mark and Kim to stay at their house for a few days. The kids liked Mark because of his unique personality. Jun-hee always played around with Mark, while Ju-young often talked to him. Outside their house, a group of teenagers was smoking on the stairs and refused to stop even when Sumi asked them to. But when they saw Mark coming, they apologized and quickly ran away. That same day, Mark packed his things because he didn't want to be a burden. As he was about to leave, Mr. Yu's men arrived to collect Sumi's debt. Mark drove the gangsters away and realized he needed to stay with the family to protect them from Mr. Yu. They were all happy to be together. They went to restaurants, ate together, and lived like a real family. Even now, it is hard for Sumi to run a business and take care of 2 kids. Her house is full of messy clothes from her work. One day, she came home and was surprised to see everything clean. Mark had also taken care of the kids so she could focus on her job. Meanwhile, Kim runs out of money and comes up with a plan. He pitches a documentary about Mark's life to a TV station to gain public sympathy and make money. Mark hesitated at first, but eventually agreed to do it. In the next scene, Mark and his family went out for a stroll and saw Korea's champion, Combo, competing in a charity event. Mark challenged him to a match and won. Everyone was shocked that an unknown fighter had defeated the champion. A few weeks later, a documentary about Mark's tough past and struggles in wrestling aired on TV. His show became a success, earning them enough money, and the kids admired their uncle even more. One day, while heading to school, they overheard a woman speaking badly about Mark. Furious, Jun-hee proudly declared that his uncle was a former champion and made Mark promise to win the national championship for him. In the next scene, we are introduced to Kim's father, an old man who still works very hard. The reason Kim wants to earn a lot of money is to give his father a good life so he can finally stop working. When they returned home, Ju-young called Mark and showed him the emails his mother had written for him. Mark discovered that his mother deeply regretted giving him up for adoption. She had written many emails to different addresses, hoping that one would reach him. In her messages, she described how difficult life was when they were together. She couldn't afford to raise him and wanted to give him a better life. Even when she was dying in the hospital, her only wish was to see Mark again and ask for his forgiveness. Mark also found out that Sumi was not really his sister. His mother had adopted Sumi after learning she had nowhere else to go. giving her a home and companionship. Shocked by the revelation, Mark became angry at Sumi for keeping the truth from him. In the next scene, the family visited Mark's mother's grave. When they arrived, he confronted Sumi and demanded an explanation for her lies. Mark decided to return to America and leave them for good. Kim tried to stop him. After that, we see Korea's champion, Combo, training for the upcoming tournament. The gangster, Mr. Yu, hired a beast of a fighter named Kane to join the competition. Kane was a former arm wrestler known for breaking his opponent's arms during matches. Years ago, he was arrested for using illegal drugs just to win. Meanwhile, Mark trained hard and prepared to return to the game. The long-awaited tournament day finally arrived. The kids were left alone at home and realized they had forgotten to return Mark's medal. Using an excuse, they took a bus and traveled to the arena to watch him fight. Sumi received a call from her friend at the arena and rushed there to get her children. The competition began, and Mark, Kane, and Combo were placed in different groups. They dominated their matches and made it to the semi-finals. The ruthless Kane injured many of his opponents and secured a spot in the finals. The investor, Mr. Cheng, and his men placed a huge bet on Kane. When they saw Mark's impressive performance, they feared losing their money. To secure Kane's victory, Chung ordered Mr. Yu to do whatever it takes. Mr. Yu offered Kim $200,000 to convince Mark to lose in the semifinals against Combo. Kim took the money and told his friend about the deal, but Mark refused. Paying off all their debts and achieving their dreams sounded tempting, but it couldn't outweigh the promise Mark made to Junhee. Determined, Mark faced Combo in an intense match and won. Before the next match, Mr. Yu caught Kim and started beating him up. Mark stepped in, pushed the gangster to the ground, and saved his friend. Kim let go of the money and urged Mark to give it his all in the final match. The final match began, and everyone was anxious about the result. Kane fought dirty. He intentionally slipped their hands apart and pulled Mark's thumb hard, putting him at a disadvantage. It seemed like Kane was about to win, but before that could happen, Mark saw the kids cheering for him. Fueled by a new motivation to prove his worth, he used his remaining strength to push Kane's hand down, defeating him in the end. In the last scene, Mark expressed his love for his mother and forgave her for past mistakes. He couldn't hold back his tears as he thought about the hardships she endured. Everyone celebrated his victory, and Mark decided to stay in Korea. In the final moments of the film, Mark prepared for the upcoming International Arm Wrestling Championship, vowing to become the #1 world champion. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel.